Okay, so today we're going to be talking about section 5.4, which is all about what are called compound inequalities. Think about the word compound as meaning putting two of them together. So a compound word has two words put together, like hot dog. A compound inequality has two inequalities put together, like a less than and a greater than. A compound inequality is two separate inequalities, and they're always going to be joined together by either the word and or the word or. So here's an example. We want x's that are greater than 2 and x's that are less than or equal to 5. We've got this word and here, which means there are two criteria. I'm looking for numbers that are both of these things, bigger than 2 and less than or equal to 5. So a number like 3 would work, whereas a number like 7, which would be greater than 2, but is not less than or equal to 5, would not work. Another way to have an inequality would be like this: x is less than 2 or x is greater than or equal to 5. The word or here means one or the other. So and means both. Or means one or the other. Either I want numbers that are less than 2 or I want numbers that are bigger than or equal to 5. But I don't want numbers that are in the middle. So what does an and inequality look like? When we want both inequalities to be true, we call it an and inequality. An example would be like this sentence: all the numbers that are greater than -2 and less than or equal to 1. Here's how we would write this. To be greater than -2, we would put an open circle on the -2 and we would shade to the right. To be less than or equal to 1, we would put a closed circle on the 1 and we would shade to the left. If you'll notice, those arrows are actually pointing towards each other. So in the end, what we're going to end up doing is shading the numbers in the middle. When you have an and inequality, you will always shade the middle. Now, how do you write and inequalities? Well, because we're looking for all the numbers that are in the middle of two numbers, we make an inequality that has an x in the middle. Now, on both sides of the x are always less thans. You will never, ever, ever have a greater than symbol in any of these problems. The number that's on the left side of this shaded area is the -2, and the number that's on the right side is the +1. Now the +1 is also closed, so we would make it an equal to. I call these sandwiches because the x is sandwiched in between these two numbers. Now, one way that I remember that I should always use less than symbols here is that I say these are called less and whiches. Less sandwiches. Less sandwiches. They are sandwiches made out of less thans with the word and. Sandwiches made out of less thans with the word ands. Less sandwiches. Now the word or means we want one or the other to be true. So if we were looking for the numbers that are greater than or equal to 2, we would put a closed circle on the 2 and we would shade to the right. If we're looking for the numbers that are less than -1, we would put an open circle on the -1 and we would shade to the left. This time, instead of the arrows pointing towards each other, they're pointing away from each other. So I like to say that when you have an or, you are pointing out. Or and out both start with the letter O. Now, how would you write this? Well, instead of the x being in the middle, we've got really two separate shaded areas here. So you just write it as two separate inequalities. X is less than -1, or x is greater than or equal to 2. And the word or is always in the middle. So let's practice this. Let's start with, if I give you a problem, can you graph it? So in problem number 1, we've got a sandwich. I can tell because the x is in the middle and there are numbers on the sides. Because there's a less than with no equal to, I'm going to put an open circle on the -2. Because there's a less than or equal to, I'm going to put a closed circle on the +1. So this one and this one. And then I'm going to shade the middle because x is in the middle. It's a sandwich, a less sandwich. All right, number 2, I'm going to go ahead and put a closed circle on the -1. I'm going to put an open circle on the +3 because the -1 has an equal to and the 3 doesn't. And I'm going to shade in the middle because it's a less sandwich. Last but not least, number 3, I'm going to put an open circle on the -4 and an open circle on the +3. So the -4 is here, the +3 is here, and I'm going to shade in between because it's a less sandwich. Number 4, I've got the word or, which means I know I should have 2 separate shaded sections. X is greater than 3 means an open circle on the 3, shade to the right. X is less than -1 means an open circle on the -1, shade to the left. So this is this shaded portion and this is this shaded portion. Just 2 separate graphs, really on the same graph. X is greater than 3. I would put an open circle on the 3, shade to the right. X is less than or equal to -2. I would put a closed circle on the -2, shade to the left. So I'm really just graphing 2 separate shaded portions. And finally, closed circle on the 1, shade to the right. Open circle on the -3, shade to the left. And again, this is just 2 separate shaded portions. Now, what could some of these look like a different way? So sometimes instead of giving you an inequality and saying, hey, make this graph, I'm going to give you a graph and say, hey, write the inequality. The first thing I need to decide is this a less sandwich or is this a great or then? So if I look at this picture, I can tell that I shaded in the middle, which means I'm going to have a sandwich. The x is always in the middle and the 2 sides are always less thans. Now in this problem, one of those less thans needs an equal to because the right-hand side has a closed circle. On the left side, we've got an open circle on the -1, and on the right side, we've got a closed circle on the +3. Now these should always be less than symbols, always. They should always look like L's. All right, number 10, again, I'm shading in the middle, so I'm going to put X in the middle. I'm going to right away put in less than symbols. Both of these circles are closed, so I'm going to put in lines underneath. The left-hand side has a circle on the -2. The right-hand side is on the +4. For number 11, we've got an X in the middle because the shading is in the middle. I've got less thans because it's always less thans. Neither of them are closed, so neither of them gets an equal to. The -4 is that where the circle is on the left, and the +3 is where the circle is on the right. Now for number 12, again, I'm shading in the middle. So I'm going to put X in the middle and less than symbols on both sides. The left-hand side this time has a closed circle, so I'm going to make that an underlined less than to mean equal to. The number on the left is a -2. The number on the right is a +2. Now number 13 is a little bit different. Instead of shading the middle, the outside edges are shaded. So the word or will go in the middle. Then we just write 2 separate inequalities. So if I look at just the left-hand side, I'm shading to the left of the number -2 and there's a closed circle. So I would write X is less than or equal to -2. If I look at the right-hand side, I'm shading to the right of the +2 and it's an open circle. So X is greater than 2. You just write it as 2 separate inequalities. Again, for number 14, the word or would go in the middle. On the left-hand side, I'm shading left of the -3 and it's closed. So x is less than or equal to negative 3. And I'm shading right of the positive 3 and it's closed. So x is greater than or equal to positive 3. And again, the word or is in the middle. The last thing we're going to talk about today is word problems. So all the real numbers that are greater than negative 2 and less than, there should be a number there. Let's say less than 2. Ooh, must have gotten deleted by accident. Okay, the first thing is, in the other problems that we did, we looked for the word is. In these problems, you are going to have to find the and or the or. First thing, you need to know right away, should this be a less sandwich or should this be two separate problems? In this problem, the word and is italicized. So, because I've got the word and, right away I'm going to build a sandwich. X is in the middle, less than's on both sides. We want the numbers that are greater than negative 2 and less than 2. So we're going to put the negative 2 on this side and the 2 on this side because this number, the left side, should always be the smaller number. And the right side should always be the bigger number. Now, since negative 2 is the smaller number and positive 2 is the bigger number, they always go from smallest to biggest. So, how would you graph this? You would put an open circle on the negative 2, and you would put an open circle on the positive 2, and you would shade the middle. Let's try another one. Number 18, all the numbers that are less than 0 or greater than or equal to 2. The word or is italicized here, so I know right away I'm going to have two separate inequalities. The first inequality is going to be all of the words that are on the left of this word. All the numbers that are less than 0. To mean less than 0, we would write x is less than 0. On the right-hand side, the words say greater than or equal to 2. So x would have to be greater than or equal to 2. Then I'm going to put an open circle on the 0 and shade to the left. And I'm going to put a closed circle on the 2 and shade to the right. Just a few more problems here to make sure we really get this. Number 19, all the numbers that are less than negative 1 or greater than or equal to 4. The first thing I notice is the word or, so I know I'm going to have two separate problems. The left-hand side says the numbers that are less than negative 1. So x is less than negative 1. And then the right-hand side says greater than or equal to 4. So I would say x is greater than or equal to 4. Open circle on the negative 1, shade to the left. Closed circle on the positive 4, shade to the right. For number 20, all the numbers that are greater than or equal to negative 3 and less than 5. I see the word and here. Tells me to make a sandwich. X in the middle, less than's on both sides. Now we want to be greater than or equal to negative 3 and less than 5. Negative 3 is the smaller number and 5 is the bigger number. So negative 3 goes on the left. And since it said greater than or equal to negative 3, I would make that side have an equal to, the one by the negative 3. So closed circle on the negative 3, open circle on the 5, shade in the middle. That is the first thing about compound inequalities, and we will practice these tomorrow.